My name is Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. And today I want to listen to a TED Talk. The guy doing this presentation, his name is Scott Griffiths. He's a PhD, and this TED Talk is going to be about muscle dysmorphia. And generally, I think he does an excellent job here. But when I went through it, I also feel like he's missing some stuff. So I want to go through this, and I want to make some additions, as he's speaking. So I'm going to start and stop this a lot as we go. So once again, it's not to tear him up, because I think he does a good job. He is educated and he does care about the subject. But I do feel that he needs a thicker presentation, not so superficial. So I'm going to start at about 30 seconds in, and I'm going to be looking at the transcript on the side at the same time.
Name for the entirety of this talk. Tim did not fit the stereotype of a person with an eating disorder. For starters, he was male when most of my clients were female. He was large and muscular when most of my clients were thin and skinny. And he spent hours at the gym lifting weights when most of my clients spent their hours running on the treadmill. Later on, I learned that Tim was using drugs to try and alter his appearance, but he wasn't using laxatives and diuretics to try and lose weight. He was using anabolic steroids to try and build muscle. Everything Tim said and did was familiar to me, but with one crucial point of distinction.
Before he does that, let me jump in. I think it depends on where your perspective is. Like he said, this particular client he had didn't fit the stereotype. I'm wondering what you're talking about. Because if we're talking about women, it's pretty easy to say that the average woman wants to be thin or lean. I mean, I know the Kardashians exist, but let's move from that. So yes, if we're talking about anorexia, it makes sense that a lot of people are trying to lose weight by calorie restriction. But what's the stereotype? Because he's talking about women. How many men out there want to look like stick figures? Not many. So again, he's talking about it, and I'm sure he cares, but it seems like he's talking about the perspective of a woman. Because the stereotype of a man is that I don't care who you are in this world as a man. You could be an accountant, a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever. But every boy, when they're small and young, they want to be big. I don't know anyone who's not. So the stereotype is the exact opposite of what he's saying. All men want to be tall. All men want to be big. All men want to be put on that pedestal. All men want to be superheroes. So I'm not really sure what he's talking about, that it was so incredibly surprising to him that there was this guy that was, oh my God, working out and eating more and maybe even taking more testosterone to grow larger. Like that was out of his perspective. Again, I'm sure, with this PhD, he's got an excellent education, but I don't know about the practicality of this. So let's move on.
The intrusive and preoccupying thoughts that he had about his body, his punishing eating and exercise routines, and his drug use were aimed toward achieving muscularity and not thinness. Tim had muscle dysmorphia.
Okay, so he just offered a diagnosis here. Tim has or had muscle dysmorphia. Let's take a look at some of the criteria that you have to meet, according to Scott Griffiths. Intrusive thoughts about achieving muscularity, I think he said. Okay? Listen, if you want to be a great drummer or guitar player and you're young, you're going to have intrusive thoughts. You're not going to think about anything else. I don't care if you want to be a good hockey player. You're going to have intrusive thoughts. You want to be an actor or actress, you're going to have intrusive thoughts. These are things that you aspire to be. This is very normal thinking. So we have to have, again, more information. At what level are these intrusive thoughts? Are they so bad that you can't function in any area of life? He didn't say that. He just said intrusive thoughts. The other thing, and let me see if I could get this perfectly here. He said his punishing eating, exercise program, and his drug use were to achieve muscularity, not thinness, I believe he said. It sounds like fitness. I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter. We'll go over each one. And then he says Tim had muscle dysmorphia. So let's go over about his supposedly punishing, because nobody's punishing, okay? Like, it's a decision that somebody makes. And somebody knows that if you want to work hard, you know, that you have a better chance of getting things. So it's not punishment. The punishment is when you don't work hard and then you don't get anything in life. So again, I think he's got that a little bit wrong. So his punishing eating, exercise program, and his drug use to achieve muscularity. Not for thinness or fitness. Okay, so let's kind of go with that. So in order to gain muscularity, how does one achieve that? Well, in order to achieve the look of muscularity, you're going to need bigger muscles. That's number one. Number two, you're going to need less body fat. And in order to do this, you're going to need weight training, right? So we need progressive resistance training for the muscles. We need some type of cardiovascular activity, and that will increase your cardiovascular output and it will drop your body fat. And then we need a good nutritional program. What part of that is a pathology? That's what I would want to ask. And moving on with that, what does lifting weights, cardiovascular activity, and nutritional program do for you? Well, just in case, because some people will say, I'm doing it for my muscularity. But what's wrong with that? Because in trying to achieve muscularity, you also do achieve health. Like somebody who's playing basketball, they might say, I'm going to play basketball, and that's socially acceptable. But typically somebody doesn't go out and say, I'm going to play basketball so I can increase my lung capacity, which is fine because that's what they do anyway. In any sport, you're going to improve your fitness or improve, as he says, your thinness. And again, thinness is not part of what anybody in the fitness field would say. My first degree was in exercise physiology. You don't use the word thinness. I believe he means leanness, which can mean that you can weigh 300 pounds, but if you have 5% body fat, you're lean. Thin, you could have 30% body fat and be thin. So he's not using the words correctly. Again, we need practicality here. So what would a person, if they're trying to achieve muscularity, what would they get along the way? Well, number one, it reverses sarcopenia, which is muscle loss, which human beings start to lose muscle somewhere between 25 and 30 years old. It reverses osteoporosis, which is bone loss. If you follow a good program, you're going to lower your risk of diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and a host of other things. More muscle equals a faster metabolism, meaning that you can eat more and actually get leaner. It strengthens your immune system, it reduces stress, it improves your self-esteem. He's going to talk about this later, saying these people who work out a lot, they have low self-esteem. Working out doesn't create low self-esteem. People that have low self-esteem that want to better their lives engage in weight training. So you can't say that, but they're actually literally going out of their way and they're taking a positive action to improve themselves. So to say that people who work out have low self-esteem makes no sense. It's like trying to correlate the two to saying that working out causes that. That's like me saying if somebody goes to a hair salon to get their hair cut, they don't like their hair. Well, right, but they're doing something about it. So why put them down and why pathologize them? It doesn't make any sense. Also, a good program supports your joint health. So, and there's more. So, but I'm just going to leave it at that for now. Let's see what else Scott Griffith has to say.
It was professional bodybuilders who first noticed it, living in California in the 80s and training in the famous outdoor gyms of Muscle Beach. They called it bigorexia, a colourful nickname for a reverse form of anorexia nervosa. But muscle dysmorphia is not limited to professional bodybuilders, just like anorexia is not limited to runway models. And the disorder doesn't start with some...
Okay, let me stop him there before he goes on. It's interesting. I don't want to get on him too much because I don't mean to be critical, but those are very interesting statements he makes. So, number one, he says muscle dysmorphia is not limited to bodybuilders. Anorexia is not limited to runway models. That's true. What would I would say here? I would say that I agree with Shakespeare. Okay, Shakespeare said all the world's a stage. So I don't care if you've been on stage at a bodybuilding show. I don't care if you aspire to be a runway model. You care about the way you look and all the benefits it creates for you. People treat you better. It's been shown that you have a higher income because people like to be around you. They're going to hire you. They just feel better around you. You have more chances of having good relationships. That's just the way it is. Some of that might not be fair. And that's probably true. We can make an argument for that, but I don't care. That's just a fact. The more beautiful you are, the more attractive you are, the more good things will come to you in your life, most likely. So to say that, like that's some type of, amazing thing he discovered, that, oh my God, like not every anorexic woman is a runway model. Right, because in our lives, most women do feel like runway models at some level. They are being looked at, and same thing with men. Most men that have issues with how they look and they want to look better, they're not all people on stage at a bodybuilding show. They're regular guys. Actually, the people who care more about how they look and spend more time thinking about the way they look because they would prefer to be better, those are the people that aren't in gyms. Right? Because they have more to complain about and they have taken on more of a victim mentality where they have not taken on positive action. So the way they look is actually more of it's more of a weight on their neck than it is for actual people here who are going out of their way to do something about it. But it's also an interesting thought that he has here that I was thinking about. Again, it's not to correct him. I actually have questions on this. The question would be is, like he said, let's say a bodybuilder or a runway model. If you are trying to meet an industry standard, or if you're trying to meet a societal standard, or you're just trying to meet a criteria to be successful in this world, is it fair to pathologize that and say you have a dysmorphia? Or are you making decisions in your life to move you forward in the way that you see fit, right? Like, okay, for example, bigorexia. You can be, if you want to be an NFL lineman, you better weigh around 300 pounds. So you're going to have to do things to weigh 300 pounds. Do you have bigorexia, or do you just want to fulfill your dream of being a football player? What if you want to be a ballerina? Maybe you love to dance. Does that make you an anorexic? Or are you making decisions that you have to look a certain way, or you have to be of a certain body type in order to be successful for a while? Again, it's possible to be both, right? You can have some type of dysmorphia and still compete at something. But I would also say that I think when you're making an honest decision to do something in your life, there are certain criteria that needs to be met, and I don't think that we need to pathologize it. Let's move on.
Sufferers wanting to have larger-than-life muscles, the beginnings are a lot more humble than that. Common among sufferers are stories of being bullied at school for being too scrawny or too fat, of difficult and fraught relationships with friends, parents, and partners, of a tendency toward perfectionism, and of a lifelong and pervasive sense of not being good enough, or what we might call low self-esteem.
He said a lot there, so let me try to go along with this. So the last thing he said is what we might call low self-esteem. Yes, it's possible to start off with low self-esteem, but it's also possible to have high self-esteem and a lot of insecurities, but still be able to objectively say where you need help. And that's okay too. Everybody with high self-esteem also has a level of insecurity, and it's okay to admit that, and it's okay to take action on it. If you take action on it, then somebody's going to pathologize you and say you have dysmorphia. That doesn't make sense to me. Also, what he's saying here is, I think he said it has very humble beginnings. Muscle dysmorphia does. Again, with respect, I'm going to have to disagree with him here. I don't think that he is putting the weight of how serious this subject is on it. He's going to casually mention it later, but let's talk about this now. It doesn't have humble beginnings. It has very deep to the core beginnings, because muscle dysmorphia, as he's trying to talk about, is not the problem, and it's not the cause. It's a symptom. So what is body dysmorphia actually? It's a symptom typically of childhood abuse, childhood neglect, sexual abuse. It can be even a little bit abuse from society. If you come from a low socioeconomic background, nobody sees you, you get no attention, you don't get treated correctly, and then you notice, oh, when I work out and I get bigger, I'm better at football. I'm better at wrestling. People notice me. Now all of a sudden people want to talk to me. Now I have chances of having connections and attachments and relationships. Right? So it's not what he's talking about. It doesn't have a humble beginning. It's not typically, okay, I'm not saying 100%, but most people that I know that are top level, top flight bodybuilders, I don't know any of them that had a pristine childhood, like even remotely close. They all come from a situation where, and I think I left this out, it's being bullied, somehow being made to feel less than, to be submissive. So when he talks about this as, you know, these people have low self-esteem, what else does he say? They have a pervasive sense of not being good enough. No, listen, man, you're not born that way. It's your environment. Now, there's a couple of things you could do when you know, and this was in Pumping Iron, so he needs to do his studying here. You can kick a dog for only so long, and there's only so many things it's going to do. You can kick a dog long enough, and it can just sit there and cower in a corner. And according to him, which I'm not saying he's saying this, but that would be like not muscle dysmorphia. That would be just you're quitting. Or you could kick the dog, and the dog could say, all right, I'm going to get stronger. I'm going to stand up, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make myself big. I'm going to make myself powerful. This is not going to happen again. And that would be the equivalent of what he's talking about, of body dysmorphia. So again, body dysmorphia is not the problem. It's a chosen, whether it's conscious or unconscious, it's a coping strategy for someone who's been bullied or abused in some way. Now, I'm not saying everybody has, but when you look at the people who really have spent their life trying to be bigger, better, stronger, there's a lot of that behind them, that they always have this axe to grind about always still trying to be good. And let's see, what else did I want to say about that? Let me move on from that so I'm not piling on too much. Let's see what else he's got to say.
And so an earnest desire to feel better through looking better results in a gym membership, a workout plan, and a diet. And they're certainly not alone in this. Over 4.5 million Australians have a gym membership. But at some point, for an increasing number of men and boys, this otherwise benign desire to be more attractive transforms into something categorically disordered. Individuals with muscle dysmorphia spend over 5.5 hours each and every day thinking about their muscles and body size.
Let me stop there. 5.5 hours a day. I've been around bodybuilders all my life. I don't know where he got that information from. If there is somebody around thinking about their body 5.5 hours a day, I would say that that's a problem that's getting in the way. So I would agree with him there. But I don't know how you would classify 5.5 hours. Somebody like me and the thousands upon thousands of other people who have made a career out of personal training, Yeah, we spend a lot of that time, but it's working hour to hour to hour with other people because it's called a job. That's how you make a living. You wouldn't say that with I don't know, a teacher at school, that you spend too much time with books, right? Like again, or a dentist. Oh my God, you spend too much time thinking about teeth. Like again, why is it about this subject that people feel so inclined to pathologize people? I don't understand it. And I think it's also lack of education. There might be some child, because I remember me and my friends when we were very young, we started learning like, oh my God, I could change my body. What are you kidding? This is the most amazing thing ever. Yeah, we would spend a lot of time reading and trying to learn as much as we can. I don't know that, well, I do know that's not a pathology. That's called being intellectually curious and learning. Just like I know some people when I was very young that would spend 10 hours a day in front of a mirror playing a guitar, because not only do they want to sound good and learn, but they wanted to be able to have that look in front of people. So it does take a lot of energy and time. So again, I'm not sure this 5.5 hour thing is correct either. Let's move on.
They turn down important social occasions so that they don't have to compromise their dieting or training.
Again, lack of education. One of the best friends of almost every bodybuilder that I know, not almost, all of them, is called Tupperware. You tend to bring food with you. All of my clients know this. You should have food at the ready. You should not have to be sitting there going, oh, I need to wait in line at Arby's or some other poisonous, processed garbage place. You should be able to have good food on you at all times because you should be eating every 3 to 4 hours. That's what a healthy person does. This is not a pathology. Let's move on.
They endure frequent, long and painful bouts of social isolation as their relationships with friends, partners, and family break down.
Again, let me stop this guy again. That's possible. I don't know. I can't speak for everybody, but sometimes relationships do break down. And one of the things that I know about bodybuilders, men or women, it usually falls into two categories of who they have relationships with. Number one, someone who shares that passion with them. They eat just like them and they go to the gym just like them, and they're basically inseparable people. Nothing wrong with that. That's a perfectly fine way to live. The other way is when they kind of go their separate ways, but the other person is completely supportive in what they do. Like they may not want to eat perfectly all the time. They may not want to work out all the time, but they allow their partner to, and I don't mean allow, like, you control somebody, but the partner goes to work out and they don't nag and get on their back. So if you're in a relationship with someone who really loves and enjoys your attractiveness, the way you look, and they love the fact that you're a healthy person, but they don't want to, let's say, they don't want to understand how much time it takes to look like that and to be that way, well, then you're probably not going to be in a relationship for that long, right? Because you're going to have to compromise the things that you love. So again, he's saying this like it's a negative. You would have to ask the person with supposedly the big anorexia if this is an issue for them. Because it's probably not an issue for them. It's an issue for the people around them saying, I need you to eat bad food with me. I need you to stay up to 3 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays. I need you, instead of spending an hour and a half to 2 hours at the gym, I need you to spend all that time meandering around on YouTube, watching late night TV for no stupid reason, watching video games or whatever. So again, it's about decisions, and to put it on the person who's trying to improve their life and taking the side of the people who are just trying to be more normal, which normal in a sense means people who typically, they're basically dead. They're just waiting to die, most of these people. They just haven't been buried yet. I mean, if you don't wake up every morning saying, I'd like to be in better health, I'd like to be more intelligent, I'd like to be better off socially. If you're not trying to do those three things, and trying to make more money, if you're not trying to do those types of things, you're basically a dead person that hasn't been pronounced dead yet. Let's move on.
Shame, guilt, anxiety, and embarrassment over one's body become their predominant emotional landscape. So much so that in the only study to look at suicide and muscle dysmorphia, fully 50% reported at least one previous suicide attempt. For Tim,
that is an incredibly damning statistic. And he's about accurate on that. But he's glossing it over. And I don't know if he is just glossing it over because he's trying to get on the TED Talk to talk about body dysmorphia, or if he's being a little bit intellectually dishonest. Because when you talk about the high suicide rate or the suicide attempts or suicidal ideations of people with body dysmorphia, underneath that is the real issue, which is there's an incredibly high rate of suicidal ideation of people who have been bullied and sexually abused and emotionally neglected. And those are the core issues that underpin body dysmorphia. So he's blaming it on people who are actually going out of their way to do something positive in their life and to probably increase their ability to have relationships, increase their ability to be cared about by other people. Because a lot of these people do tend to be introverts. So if you're introverted, how do you get people to come to you? You have to do something that's very attractive. You're like, oh my God, the way you do this is amazing. The way you do that is amazing. Oh, you're so beautiful. People come to you. So this, again, it's a good coping strategy. It's not the best because there's still underlying issues. And you don't want to just work out all the time and not handle the core issues if you've been sexually abused or neglected or bullied. That's true. But it's not telling the truth for him to say that this is a problem because people have body dysmorphia. It's the issues underneath it that he fails to mention. And listen, he's got a PhD. I think he's smart enough to know this, but he wants to get on a TED Talk. And I understand that. Listen, good for him. I've been trying to get a TED Talk for about 10 years and nobody's called me. And neither has Dr. Phil. So good for this guy. Let's continue.
the pain caused by lifting weights with a sprained wrist was preferable to the anxiety caused by missing a workout session.
Absolutely. And the reason for that is it's not body dysmorphia. It's called being a rugged individual in the United States. And it's called being a man. Listen, from the time you're like 5 years old, your level of consciousness, boys are told when you fall, get up. You cry? Yeah, I'll give you something to cry about. So again, this is true. If I had a sprained wrist, it's preferable to train with that than missing a workout because I'd have to tell somebody, I didn't work out. Well, why didn't you work out? Because I couldn't handle the pain. You might as well tell somebody I have no testosterone and no spine. And then it makes it that you're not a person who could be depended on. A sprained wrist, that's nothing. That's nothing. I've trained with a broken wrist. I've won a show with a broken wrist. I've won a show when I couldn't actually walk upstairs because my hip needed to be replaced. This is not body dysmorphia. This is what you would call, in a sense, toxic masculinity because you're taking it to another level that's too high. But when it's infused in you from the day of your birth, it's a difficult thing to reverse. Plus, I think most men with a lot of testosterone do have that ability to want to push themselves all the time. Let's move on.
Not knowing the precise macronutrient content of the food he would be served was enough to compel him to miss a mate's wedding.
Again, lack of education. I don't think somebody would miss their best friend's wedding over a meal. They would know how to eat a nutritious meal before or after, or bring a protein drink, sip it in the car, like I don't know, like I haven't done it, right? And like every single guy I know, we've all done that. And then you go to a wedding and then you eat all the fruit. Like, come on, he's overdoing this, A, or B, he's just talking to bodybuilders that really need an education. I'm not sure. Let's continue.
Now, some of you might be skeptical, and I get it. There is a concern that psychologists and academics like myself are needlessly pathologizing the otherwise extremely broad and normal spectrum of human behavior and experience. That we're taking boys and men's earnest desire to be more attractive versions of
All right, I'm
themselves
going to move this up a little bit because I'm going to be here all day. Let me try to...
and convincingly tell me that they're obese despite being clearly and dangerously thin. A person with muscle dysmorphia can look me in the eye, tell me they're scrawny despite being objectively very muscular.
Not true. I've never met anybody like that. While it is true that there's probably somebody out there that looks in the mirror and goes, oh my God, I'm skinny, when they weigh 280 pounds and they only have like 3% body fat, I've never seen it. Again, he doesn't have practical knowledge. What he's misunderstanding and misinterpreting is how bodybuilders really are. You can ask the greatest bodybuilder in the world if he's good enough or big enough, and that person will say no. They could always look for more. It's always about that. I have won bodybuilding shows, and yet I was still the first one to get dressed and run down to the judges' table and ask them, what can I do to get better? And they would say, well, what do you mean? You won. I said, yeah, only from the people in this show, but I'm not the best in the world. So tell me what I need to do to do that. And so that's just being a good athlete. That's just, again, he doesn't like the word athlete. I believe bodybuilders are athletes. And so he's wrong here again. Let's just take it off of body dysmorphia for a second. I read an interview with John Mayer, who's a really good guitar player. And I think the interview was in Guitar World. And they asked him about his guitar playing. And they said something to the effect of, you're one of the best modern day guitar players. And he said, no, I'm not. He said, when I'm at my best, what I'm doing is I'm a 10th rate Jimi Hendrix type of imposter. I'm trying to be Jimi Hendrix and I fail every single time, and yet you think I'm good. What would you say about John Mayer then? Would you say that he's a humble guy that wants to be a better guitar player? Yes, that's you. But no, if he was in this type of situation when we're dealing with therapists, you would say that he has some type of dysmorphia because he doesn't understand how good of a guitar player he is. That's not true. He does understand how good he is. He's just humble and wants to be better. So stop saying it's a pathology because it's not. Let's move on.
Muscle dysmorphia, like all eating disorders, is a very real mental
You
disorder.
haven't proven that to me yet.
And we know muscle dysmorphia is becoming more common because of what we're seeing with steroids. Anabolic steroid.
No. Okay, steroids are becoming more popular, but that doesn't mean that it's correlated to muscle dysmorphia. Okay, there's plenty of places now. And the reason why it's getting more popular is because it's in the general public now. As a man gets older, he's allowed to go to anti-aging clinics now. You couldn't do this in the 80s. I don't even think, maybe in the 90s you could. I don't think so. But now it's pretty well normal that you see commercials on TV about testosterone therapy. And that's for men who just don't want to age as much. And women do this too. They also are allowed hormonal therapy, but no one calls them and says that they have body dysmorphia. You know, if you see a woman and they go to an anti-aging clinic, one of the first questions they're going to get is, do you have vaginal dryness? And if the answer is yes, what do you think they're going to do? Go, well, yeah, it feels great when my husband has sex with me. It feels like somebody's sticking a razor blade in me. And everybody goes, well, that's cool. No, they try to fix it with hormones. You know, so they make it so things are more lubricated. It's the same thing with a man. Like, why should an aging man have to be, well, okay, I don't want people to think I have body dysmorphia, so I'm not going to get testosterone, and I'm going to allow my body to become old and decrepit before my time just because. No, modern medicine allows men to get testosterone, so why would they not use it? It doesn't make sense. Stop pathologizing it.
Are now the #1 most commonly injected drug among new injection drug users in this country. That's ahead of heroin, methamphetamine, opioids, all other drugs. And it's not even news. It's been this way for the past 5 years. They're not athletes. Fewer than 1 in 10 men who use steroids in this country play any type of sport. And that's if I'm generous and include non-traditional sports like boxing and MMA. The modern day demographic profile of new injection drug use in this country is boys and men who simply want to look better, and I'm willing to bet that's news to most people in this room.
It shouldn't be news. First of all, the average person who does steroids in this country, and I do believe it's probably more popular than heroin, like he said, that's true. And that's because there's a lot of men who do want to improve themselves. So in a sense, you could say that's actually a good thing because there's more men who want to improve themselves than want to just obliterate themselves, right? So what is the average steroid user like? What's the profile? Here's the profile. It's a man, 32 years old, obviously old enough to make his own decisions, tends to be well educated, and he has above average income. How about that? Why? Because if you're smart and you have money, you're going to spend it on yourself to live a better life. That's why. Moving on.
Tragically, we're limited in what we can do for individuals who use steroids, regardless of whether or not they have muscle dysmorphia, because the research simply hasn't been done on how to safely discontinue the numerous types and combinations of steroids that are out there. You know, for example, I had a young man who was taking equipoise. This is a veterinary steroid we used to give to racehorses.
It's interesting how he said we used to give it to racehorses. I think that was just a mistake he made, or maybe he just outed himself for giving out steroids. I'm not really sure. But anyway, let's move on.
He said to me, Scott, what's going to happen if I stay on this long term? I said, I don't know, mate. Maybe you'll win the Melbourne Cup. Admittedly, the short-term side effects of steroids...
Let's stop it there because I think we want to have a lot of level of empathy and compassion for people that, you know, the select few that do have body dysmorphia. And it is difficult going through life and society with their expectations and trying to look better and do better. But he makes a joke here about equipoise, and he says you could win the Melbourne Cup. I'm assuming the Melbourne Cup is a horse race. So he says something here about, he's trying to make the point and make a joke about with his client, saying he uses equipoise, which is it's a steroid for horses. But again, intellectually dishonest, because if we really get into this, we need to understand that diuretics, for example, the diuretics we give to animals are the same diuretics we give to human beings. The antibiotics we give to animals are the same diuretics we give to human beings. Glucosamine and chondroitin, that is for joint health, that I take every day, is the same medication, just obviously different dosages that are given to animals. So it's extremely dishonest to try to get a good laugh on a TED Talk about somebody using a horse drug when a lot of what we do take are the same drugs that we give to animals. Now, just to keep going with this, again, he tries to make a joke about equipoise. Equipoise is actually safer than testosterone. It's a testosterone derivative, but it's less androgenic, meaning that it doesn't aromatize as much, so it doesn't create as much estrogen. It's the high estrogen that can cause prostate cancer, for example. So that's why someone would go out of their way to get a designer medication that's actually safer than testosterone. He doesn't say that here because he doesn't have practical knowledge of why somebody would do such a thing. It also helps in gaining weight because it increases your appetite and it doesn't make you retain water. So in a sense, you become more and more muscular, and it increases red blood cells, so it increases your vascularity, and it increases your cardiovascular output. And that's it. That's all you need to know about that. Let's move on. I'm going to move this up to a little bit more because I don't want this show to be too long. So let's put it right up to here. All right, let's try it again. Let's see what else he's got to say.
Walker and Han Solo from the original release of the Star Wars trilogy. And on the right, you see the re-release. They've adopted that classic bodybuilder pose of big arms and broad shoulders and a muscular chest. And this is an analog to the Barbie dolls that are widely recognized and criticized, marketed to young girls. And it's not limited to action figures. Research shows this same pattern of increasing muscularity in fitness magazines, television, movies, video games, and increasingly in social media. There is no gene in boys'
Let me stop him right there. He's wrong. Just flat out. And okay, so here are my examples if you need it. He's talking about body dysmorphia or muscle dysmorphia increasing with young men today, or even older men, because of media images now. And he uses an anecdotal as evidence, as Luke Skywalker being bigger now than the figurine in 1977. And he's right, that it is true. Luke Skywalker does look bigger now than the version that they had in 1977. Granted. But here's the thing. If you look at movies today, you're looking at people like The Rock, for example. What's his name? Chris Helmsworth? I don't even know his name. And that other guy, Momoa, I don't even know. I don't even follow this anymore. But I know what they look like. Jason Momoa, I think his name is. Those three guys are probably the three biggest in Hollywood today. And none of them, and I mean none of them, have ever won a bodybuilding show or will ever win a bodybuilding show. They don't have what it takes. So let's go back to the 80s. Look at their stars. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the greatest bodybuilder who ever lived. Case closed. Like, you can't argue that. You know, you want somebody else? How about the Incredible Hulk? That was a great series, right? Lou Ferrigno, one of the greatest bodybuilders who ever lived, 275 pounds. And he did win a lot of bodybuilding shows. There's no comparison here. You know, let's go to Carl Weathers, who was Apollo Creed, Dolph Lundgren, Jean-Claude Van Damme. You had shows on TV like American Gladiators that did have professional bodybuilders on it. These guys and men, men and women, were larger than life. So you can't compare and say today it's because people are so big and look in such great shape that it's making people have dysmorphia, when it's categorically wrong. Through the 80s and 90s, there were many, many, many more bodybuilders that look better than the people today. You know, we can go on. Your average musician today is basically a nondescript human being. The average musician in the 80s, they had big, massive hair, you know, like that's pretty impressive. They had makeup, so they facially looked perfect. Typically, they did not wear t-shirts. They wore super tight spandex, and they would always stuff their spandex with the sock. So you're talking about over-masculinization? That was in the 80s, man. You got that totally wrong. It doesn't make sense. There was a lot more to deal with if you were a jealous person or you were going to get dysmorphia. It was a lot more in the 80s than it is now. Look at bodybuilding shows. Bodybuilding shows used to be bodybuilding shows. It was an amazing thing to win a title because everybody knew you were the best bodybuilder, the top of the top in your class. Now it's not like that. Starting in 2012, they started Men's Physique, where you didn't really have to work out that much. I mean, things are changing now, but since 2012, which is only 10 years ago, they started this thing where you could wear shorts down to your knees so you didn't have to work on your legs. You didn't have to do a routine. It was more for like a woman's pageant. So bodybuilding has been watered down to nothing. So again, like if you look at bodybuilders in the 80s and 90s, that was like part of the golden age along with the 70s. Now there is no the golden age is dead. Bodybuilding is basically dead. It's made for a bunch of people to give everybody a trophy that's marginally good or just average at best these days. So no, this guy's totally wrong and doesn't have any knowledge of actually what's going on. So this is getting to be long. Let me finish with this because his last statement here is very, very interesting. And I like it, so let's play it.
Genetic code that immunizes them from the influence of these messages.
So let me stop there. He said, there is no gene in a boy's genetic code that immunizes them from the influence of these messages. Let's read that again. That's important. And it's very good. There is no gene in a boy's genetic code that immunizes them from the influence of these messages. That's true. That's 100% true. But you want to know why? Because the gene is not supposed to immunize you from hard work, right? The gene is there for you to survive. So if you see people that are bigger than you, better than you, smarter than you, make more money than you, the natural gene, if you're going to call it that, is to survive and to do better than the people around you so you have more access to good things in life. You want a girl, you're going to have to be better than the average guy. And so if you see a bunch of people that have really nice cars, you can't be strolling around on a bicycle. You know, if you have no muscle and you're slumped over all the time, you're going to realize that, okay, to be a better man, you're going to have to stand tall, chin up, chest out, back straight. You're going to have some muscle to you. You're going to have some confidence. So he's saying that there's no gene that immunizes you from this. Yeah, that's true, but that's true for every single animal on the face of the planet. That's just the way it is. Women are always going to be attracted to a better guy. And yeah, while it might be true that a woman can like you for who you are, and I got all that, and you have this special connection, that's true. But when they see a better looking guy on TV, they're going to look at him with a little bit more desire in terms of certain things than you, and you have to be okay with that. So you know what, I'm going to end it at that because it's been a little bit of overkill. It's 45 minutes, and I think you get what I'm talking about here. But overall, I think it was a very good talk by Dr. Scott Griffiths. And listen, I'd love to have a conversation with him. We could talk shop. That would be good. He's a good speaker. He cares about what he's talking about. He's educated. I just don't think he spent too much time in gyms. That's all. Anyway, I hope this was valuable to you. My name is Joe Peroni. This is the Rise Above Project. Please subscribe and tell a friend. Thank you.